What is democracy? Is it a form of government? Is it a bundle of rights and obligations reserved by we the people to build and sustain a civil society? Is it a way of life? Discover a few minutes at a time what democracy looks like, sounds like, tastes like, feels like through Civics 101, interviews, life out and about town, and acts of kindness, highlighting you the person and we the people. I'm Beth Radow, co-president of the Larchmont Mamaroneck, New York chapter of the League of Women Voters. I'll be your guide. Thank you for traveling along on this journey.
Change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
The health of the democratic spirit itself is at issue, and the renewal of that spirit is the urgent task at hand. The very identity of our nation depends on the passing of civic ideals to the next generation.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Welcome to the second episode of This is What Democracy Looks Like. The subject today is Civics in Action. In his inaugural address on January 20, 1961, with the backdrop of the Cold War and evolving civil rights movement, John Fitzgerald Kennedy spoke these now iconic words, challenging Americans to focus on our civic duties and responsibilities instead of on what we could gain from the government. This goal inspired a new generation of American thinking and action to foster understanding and cooperation between people. One example is the Peace Corps, developed by JFK in 1961, which selects American volunteers to provide technical assistance on projects in collaboration with locals in global communities. Today, we'll revisit the topic of citizen engagement in relation to our community. A sustainable democracy depends upon civic-wise, curious, caring, and committed citizens. Mamaroneck High School educator Joe Liberti has developed the 4-year original Civics and Research and Action program, familiarly known as OCRA, for high school students to acquire essential civics knowledge and life skills to engage as citizen participants and to improve community conditions. I invited Joe Liberti to talk with me. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
What's OCRA?
So OCRA, which stands for Original Civic Research and Action, it's a 4-year program at Mamaroneck High School. The mission of OCRA is to help students become civic entrepreneurs. So the civic part is really about understanding their obligations as a member of the community. And the entrepreneurial part is really about them developing, problem-solving skills in order to make that positive change within the community. So as I mentioned, it's a 4-year program. Starts with the freshman year. Freshmen come before school once a week from 7 to 7:45. That year we're focused on sort of learning about the community, broadly speaking. That sophomore year, it gets embedded into the regular school day. And there they're deepening their research on the community in various ways. And they're also being introduced to what we call systems thinking as a way of understanding the systems that we exist within and how one makes change within those systems. Towards the end of that sophomore year, they themselves pick their own issue, need that they want to focus in on and develop a group around that. So I don't determine the groups, they pick the groups. And then they begin the problem definition process, which eventually leads to the development of their projects, which they start to refine and implement during their junior and senior years. Again, all of this, as I mentioned earlier, is done with the help of community mentors that come on board during those last 2 years to help guide them.
When do they come up with the project idea? Is that in junior year?
So the project, the second half of that sophomore year, they're going through a problem definition process. So it's a multi-step process. And as they get towards the end of that, they are beginning to formulate the outlines of a project. And by that, I mean they've written a problem statement. They have identified a goal or goals. They're thinking about potential strategies. And they're really then working backwards and thinking about, or how do we go from sort of that goal to maybe utilizing these strategies to what are like sort of the main deliverables. And they're developing, in essence, is I guess what engineers might call like a Gantt chart, or it's basically a project management document, where they're working backwards from those goals because they're trying to sort of game out what a 2.5-year project looks like. So during that summer and moving into that junior year, they're fine-tuning that, project and beginning to implement it, again, under the guidance of community mentors.
How do you find mentors?
So to some degree, it can be both sort of organic, and by that I mean during that sort of research phase in that second half of the sophomore year, where they're reaching out and having discussions with nonprofits and community leaders, people who've worked in these areas, to try to better understand, what this need is, what this issue is. Those relationships often then develop into a potential mentorship. It can also be the case that depending on the particular topic, the issue, having worked, over the years in the community myself through different projects and whatnot, I have sort of a fairly large Rolodex. So I can be like, hey, you should consider reaching out to this person. I know they've been interested in this or they've worked on this in the past. I think this person could potentially be a good mentor. So sometimes I'm acting as sort of the connecting piece to it. So it's both sort of organic through the research process as well as myself sort of, hey, let's connect you to this person. I think they could be really helpful in the project.
So suppose somebody's watching this, they haven't been a mentor yet, they've got expertise that might work. Can we find a way to connect them to you?
Absolutely. So I am always searching for and welcoming community mentors. Easiest way is typically just to email me using my school email.
All right, we'll put it at the end. Why don't we just put it at the end of the show and we'll get people to get in touch with you. Going back to the beginning, what inspired you to start OCRA in the first place?
So the inspiration for OCRA really goes back to the work that I've started to do when I was teaching the AP U.S. Government and Politics course, what we just call AP Gov at Mamaroneck High School. So starting in, I guess it was 2011, I'd only been teaching the course for maybe like 2 years. And I just sort of almost at the gut level knew that we just had to do more than what we were doing with students in the classroom, that students really needed to engage in politics outside the classroom. And the only way they really were going to learn, I thought, was by doing it. And so I've been thinking about sort of different experiences that were possible. I've been inspired by some work that former friends of mine had done. And that's when in 2012, I brought 3 sections of the AP Gov class up to New Hampshire. So about 70 students I brought to New Hampshire, and they got directly involved in the presidential primary process. So they volunteered for various candidates of their choice. They got a chance to interact with senior staffers, campaign staffers. They got opportunities to interact with the media, national media at all different levels. A chance to go to different forums where they themselves could be, asking questions of, national, journalists you would see on national programs, and literally asking candidates face-to-face questions, interacting with those candidates. And I knew that this would be a really enriching experience, but I don't think I really realized how impactful it was going to be until we got back from New Hampshire, and I just could not believe how it really affected students deeply.
How? What'd they say?
So one is just that there was this energy that they carried forward for the rest of the year, questions that they were curious to continue to kind of think about. The way they viewed things was different as a result. having attended various political events and having the opportunity to sort of take it in yourself and then go read the newspaper or go on to Fox News or CNN and then see the way it was described and how it could be different, gave them, I think, insight that you otherwise could never have gained unless you were actually in that moment. And then, of course, upon graduation, students who then, would update me about campaigns that they had volunteered at while in college or positions they'd taken with various senators and congresspersons as a result of the work that we had done in AP Gov.
So how did you get from going to New Hampshire or other venues to transitioning to this project?
So the more work I was starting to do with students outside the classroom, the more I saw how powerful this could be, how transformative it could be. So it really just became a question of how could I possibly do this all the time? And I started to look around at, the programs at Mamaroneck High School that really I felt delivered an educational experience that was transformational. And for me, it was those 4-year programs, such as the Performing Arts Program or PACE, the Original Science Research Program, the Music Program. So these are 4-year programs that teach students teach them the skills of that profession. And then the students practice them, not in isolation, but they practice them as professionals, whether it's on the stage or it's going to scientific conferences and presenting your research and being questioned on it. So it's developing those skills that the professionals use themselves, but then actually practicing them and producing professional products. And so the question was, well, how do I do that within this world of civic engagement? And that's where OCRA was born.
When was your first year for OCRA?
So I launched in the fall of 2017.
And how has it evolved in the years since?
So the one thing is just the numbers. My very first class, I think I had 25 students sign up. And then last year...
Which is a good number.
Yeah.
It's a good number.
Considering I was pitching something that had never been done before.
Right.
I couldn't turn and say, oh, it's just like this, or it's just
Right.
like that, or
Right.
it's like this school has, because I had not come across a 4-year program like this. So one thing is just the numbers. So again, 25 in that first cohort, and then this year my freshman cohort was about 125. So it's grown, and with that, I've been fortunate enough to receive the support of the administration. I've been able to bring on a second teacher, Peter O'Byrne, which is fantastic. So that's obviously one big change. I think the other thing that's changed, as I've learned, is introducing sort of a particular way of thinking. So when I think of other programs, like for example, original science research, you're starting with the scientific method, scientific thinking, and there are lots of different ways to think about things, obviously, and no one is necessarily the one way to think about it. But for me, the one way of thinking that I think is just so important that I introduce to students in OCRA, and that's systems thinking. It's been personally a really powerful framework in which to think about institutions, community, all the systems that we are part of, that we interact with, and starting to sort of understand how one makes change within those systems. And that has been a really powerful way in which students can start to think about that.
So in the Cliff Notes, for people who might not be familiar with systems thinking, can you explain what that is?
Sure. So I think we all sort of intuitively know by the time we're adults what a system is, right? So a system's is sort of this whole made up of parts, right? That those parts are interacting, and that system is producing something. Sometimes it's producing what we intend it to produce, right? It has a purpose, but it produces something. And in order to make change, you have to understand that we're working within systems, and therefore nothing's linear. That when you make any change to a system, there's always these loops, these feedback loops. And so one makes a change, and then one has to understand how that affects the system overall, and then go back and reevaluate that. So it's this circular way of thinking about how systems work, and that when we make change, we have to then come back and understand how did that change the output, and what needs to then be changed in order to, again, get those desired results.
So one of the questions that's been on my mind, and I think you're answering it, but if you'd elaborate, is how has OCRA transformed the students?
Yeah, so one is, first off, it brings them back to a point that we all started with when we were younger in education, which is curiosity. And unfortunately, for various reasons within the system of education, that curiosity can get lost along the way. So one is just sort of rekindling the curiosity that's there within us as humans, right? What are you curious about? What are you trying to understand? Let them be curious about things they're seeing. And then again, it's providing them with a way of thinking, again, systems thinking, to start to think about how those pieces they're seeing fit within systems, and then to think about how one begins to bring about change within that. And then there's all the sort of skills they're developing along the way, not because they're told, like you must develop this skill because there's a quiz tomorrow, or you need to know this information because there's a test next week.
It's organic.
It's sort of it's like on demand, right? We talk about sort of on demand economy, but like in that sense, like what drives students to develop those skills or master that content is because they need to, right? They need to understand that if they're going to make change within it. They need that skill if they're going to communicate in this particular forum. And so in that sense, it's very different, right? It's not you're being told you need to know this because there's a quiz tomorrow, there's a test next week, but rather that you cannot you cannot reach your goals, you cannot improve the community unless you develop these particular skills and you have this particular, content knowledge.
Yeah, it becomes integrated into your being, really.
Right.
How about the mentors? How has OCRA? You've obviously communicate with them. What do they say to you about the experience?
So it's interesting. In one of your earlier questions, you were asking about sort of, how has the program changed over time? When I originally, designed this, the community mentors are an integral part of that design. I wanted to leverage the sort of the passion and curiosity and energy of the students with the sort of wisdom and expertise that exists in the community. There's a sort of almost a wall that's there unintentionally, but nonetheless there that I wanted to bridge. But what I didn't really anticipate or think about, which in hindsight I don't know why, but is the effect that it has on mentors, right? I was always, the mentors are guiding, so it's like sort of this one-way arrow, right? Which is, of course, failure of sort of systems thinking. Forgetting about the loop here. And that is the effect that it has on mentors, which has been tremendous. I can think of I'm thinking of one mentor who works in the area of affordable housing. For decades, this person's worked in that area. And it can be a real grind. Right. You can feel like, hey, we're not making much progress here. And then along come, 4, passionate young adults who really want to see if they can move the needle here, if they can improve the community in that particular area. And the energy that those young people bring to it and the passion can reinvigorate and often reinvigorates those mentors. It makes them sort of, remember, oh, this is why I'm doing this work. This is hard work, but there are young people who care about this work just like I do. So it's been really fantastic to see how that energy sort of loops back. And many mentors, look forward to mentoring the future again, which again, I think I take as a good sign.
So let me ask you about you. How has it impacted, has it transformed you? What's the impact been?
So again, I think back to when I launched this, and I was so focused on certain aspects of the program, but never thinking about how might this affect me. And the effect's actually been profound. The way I think of education is completely different. I used to think, oh, I am, delivering content. I am taking, standards, and I'm figuring out how to take those standards and deliver this information to students. Or I've got this framework that's been, handed down from, the College Board. I'm working within that framework to get students ready for this exam. Mm-hmm. And within that, I was thinking, oh, I'm teaching students how to think. And I'm not saying I wasn't, but not to the degree I thought I was. And what I mean by that is that you often, at least within, I find in social studies, content areas, there's so much content that you're often having to deliver it in a way that the thinking is kind of done for the students unintentionally, where you might say, hey, we're analyzing this primary document, and you're trying to develop certain analytical skills which I think are great. Those can be transferred. But at the same time, there's sort of like there's an answer to the document. Like you need to know that this is what the document means. So when it shows up in the exam, you have the right answer, right? So when I developed OCRA and launched it, it really started to make me question sort of what I have been doing for years, and made me think about, like, what does it really mean to teach a student how to think? What does it mean to give them a framework of thinking that they can carry with them throughout life? And so the way I taught before is so vastly different than the way I teach now. The way I think about skill development is vastly different. Because I really think, and this is sort of personal, but also through discussions with other people, it's only by really practicing those skills in an authentic way, which is never to say you can't practice those skills initially or in certain contexts that are artificial. I mean, I can think of sports analogies where, like, you're going to practice something not on a field, but to kind of get the repetition in. But at some point, to really develop that skill to the level of a professional, you have to actually practice it as a professional would be out in the field, And so for me, that was sort of something that I knew intuitively, but I'd also seen research saying the same thing. I knew it personally, but it was also sort of the doing of it that I realized, right, this is the way education should be. So to me, like, I think about what I'm doing. I'm like, this is a model for what education should be. And if possible, we should try to do this as much as we can. So again, I go back to like original science research. Like that is such a powerful way of students learning science. And if we could do that more often across as many subject fields as possible, I think we would be amazed by what students could do, what young people can do. I think they're so much more capable than we give them an opportunity to demonstrate.
Do you see in them more of a sense of, this is a big word now, agency, but do you observe in them that they show that they're more in control of what they're doing?
Yeah, no, I think, we all know in the world of civic engagement that agency is a key piece here, right? That people who have a strong sense of agency, a belief that they can affect the world around them, are the ones who really are the leaders. And while students enter OCRA sort of with different levels of agency, it's through the doing that they all develop a greater sense of agency. And it's deep. Yeah. Everyone hits walls throughout that project phase. For sure. And some of those walls are thick and high. And they have to, in some cases, pivot, like it's a 180, like they've tried to problem solve around this. They've worked with their mentors to try to problem solve around this. And for various reasons, it's just simply not possible at that moment. And they've got to pivot. But it's in the pivot that I think that agency really is deepened. And so that they understand going forward that, yes, I have that power to affect the world around me, but I also understand that there'll be times when it's very difficult, and it's only by working with others that we really can bring about the change that we all wish.
So you now have gone from 25 students to 125. You are a rock star in the community, but you're human also. I mean, that's quite extraordinary in terms of the numbers. I also know from speaking to other people in Westchester County that people say, well, we want to put OCRA into other schools. And, you know, I've taught at a graduate level course that's not dissimilar to this, but I also know that the person who's doing it has a lot to do with the success of the program. And it takes certain mixture of skills. It takes, and passion and all the rest of it. But we do need to be able to have this kind of practical education out there. So when you think about taking OCRA and replicating it and scaling it, if you will, what are your thoughts about that, and how might that be accomplished?
So definitely during, you know, the early years of OCRA, not that it's been around that long, people would ask this question: is can this be replicated? And at that time, I was still iterating, figuring things out,
Right.
And wasn't quite sure. I've gotten to a point now where I do believe this is a program that can definitely be replicated, and I think that there's an opportunity for school districts to seize the moment. I think there's a hunger out there from young people who, you know, if you look at survey data, like they do want to have a positive effect on the world. They're just not sure like how one goes about that, and you're probably not going to learn that on TikTok.
No.
So I think there's a hunger for this at many levels, and I think too, when I think about like social studies teachers and my colleagues and all the social studies teachers I've interacted over the years, you know, a lot of them went into social studies, you know, teaching because they wanted to have a positive impact in the world. They wanted to work with young people. They wanted to inspire young people. They wanted to help young people, you know, have a positive impact on the larger world around them. And then you start teaching, you know, your Regents level courses, your AP courses, and you're focused on delivering that content.
Right.
And I totally understand that, you know, you're getting them ready for these Regents exams, you're getting them ready for the AP exams. And you can lose some of that sort of passion, you know, the reason you came into this in the first place. And I would say to, you know, all those social studies teachers, like, here's an opportunity to sort of, you know, rekindle, rediscover that passion for why you became a social studies teacher. And I think, you know, OCRA is, you know, a model of what we can do with young people if we structure it a certain way, give them the opportunity to sort of, you know, drive the bus, right? This is not, you know, the teacher in charge. The teacher's guiding them along the way, but at some point they take the reins and they're driving the bus. They're the ones who are driving their project. It's a chance for them to develop the skill set to work with their contemporaries, right? To be responsible to each other, to understand the obligation to this work, and that they're producing something public. So I think that the program is a great model, and I'm hoping to communicate this, you know, over the next 2 years with surrounding districts, to say, hey, here's a chance to develop something that I think has just a tremendous impact on young people and the community, you know, more largely.
To be able to convey it in a toolkit, if you will, or something along those lines.
Correct.
To be able to replicate.
Right.
Well, this has been a great conversation. Just want to end on one thing, which is, what is your greatest joy out of putting this on the map?
So there's so many times I almost, you know, want to pinch myself. It's like, I can't believe like I'm getting to do this. It really is. I say this a lot, but I'm incredibly appreciative of the school board, central administration, building administration over the years that have supported this program. You know, there are so many times, you know, every week where you see things just clicking. You know, where a particular group or groups, it's working just as you intended, and by that I mean they are passionate. They are trying to figure something out. They are developing those communication skills with adults in the community. They're working hand in hand with that mentor. And you you're now just, as they say, a guide on the side, right? You're not telling them what to do. They are figuring out on their own how to reach that goal they laid out for themselves years ago, and discussing, like, what are the deliverables for this, for this next 2-week period, and what do we need to do individually to make sure we get those deliverables done on time. And so when you see those students take charge, and they are leading, their projects forward, to me, that's what's just fantastic about it.
So in this episode, we're going to be featuring an OCRA student. And as you know, because I've come to visit, my goal over the course of the period of time that I'm doing This Is What Democracy Looks Like, I'm looking forward to incorporating the projects of students in your class. So this is a conversation to be continued. Thanks for coming.
Thanks again for having me.
Take care.